Uh, Hello, we're there.
Hello, we are.
Yes,
Yay, there
welcome
we are.
everybody to our next in session. And we have, who's here? Oh, we've got Greg, and we also have Isabel. Do you want to introduce Noah?
Oh, yes, very, very happy. I'm not muted, that's good. And even happier to introduce Noah Norman, our good friend and the big boss at Hard Work Party. Um, it feels like we've done so many different things with Noah, at least several Touch Designer summits. And, and Noah sure has done a lot with Touch Designer. We're going to get into a bit of some of that today. But
Should maybe
first,
mention, sorry,
hmm?
should mention the Touch Designer talks that you gave are the summit talks. Both of them from
That's
Berlin
right.
and Montreal are on YouTube, as well as a really nice interview with PSSSST1, right?
Psst. Thanks, psst.
Yeah.
I
So
would caveat
that's
that by saying both of those recordings from
Summit
Montreal,
2018.
Berlin? No, Montreal. I was extremely food poisoned, and I blame Hal and Landon and Elvers for that.
just to
I
get
thought it
that
was.
out there right away.
The worst food poisoning of my life.
I thought it was Berlin that you were really food
Oh, you're
poisoned.
right. No, it was Berlin.
It was Berlin.
Both
Yeah,
recordings
yeah,
were Berlin. I didn't
yeah,
do a talk. But
yeah,
I tried
yeah.
to get a hookah bar in Berlin, which seemed like a pretty innocuous thing to do. I almost died during my talk. So just
Anyway, we had no clue, so you have really good food poisoning face.
die.
Yeah, thank God you didn't.
Well, thank you for
So,
having me.
yeah, it's about time.
And you gave your talk at Berlin 2018 on drawing graphics with Python, which is pretty good, and then also something else on liquid shaders in GLSL. It's pretty good too. And also, I might mention too that there's I'll post this at the end. You did a great interview with Elbers about 2 or 3 weeks ago on the Python insides of Elsewhere. And I recommend everybody look at that because it's a great look at really structured, well-structured Python in a decent-sized project. So I'll post a link to that at the end of this session.
Okay. So what we're going to discuss today is mostly to do with Elsewhere Soundspace, that crazy space cult Twitch streaming show that you did everything Touch Designer related for, the whole engine. But first, since we have this image here is you, right? It's you on your about Hard Work Party, and there's a couple of things on that page, including something that I think would be interesting to get some feedback with from the audience today. And it's, you say that creates artworks and provides creative technical services for projects that are hard to explain to your mom. So this is personally a problem that I've always had, explaining what Touch Designer does to my mom. And I don't know, I think it's might be a recurrent problem with, unless it's just my mom and maybe your mom, but I mean, have you found a workaround?
My mom is extremely computer savvy, but I don't think it's specifically Touch Designer so much as just, immersive, experiential kind of digital artwork. I think departs from a foundation of like a conversation that kind of includes things that happened before my time during my mother's life. But if that's not a kind of a version of art and culture that you don't have like the kind of like baseline conversant or experience with, we're now at a point where it's kind of like, I don't watch TV very much, but when I do watch TV, commercials come on, and the response that I have to the commercial is, this commercial assumes that you have been watching commercials for the last decade, and it's there's a language compressed into this commercial that is a shorthand for like all the punchlines that have been in commercials before it, and there's like these kind of stereotypes and kind of cultural assumptions that are like baked into the commercial that they're like skipping over and assuming that you already share that language. And so when I see them, I'm like, what is going on? Like, I didn't understand that commercial at all. And I think that's part of what like my mom's experiences of the kind of work that I put out is kind of like, I'm missing several steps that I need. Like I can appreciate it on an aesthetic level, but there's a bunch of stuff that I'm missing. It's like when I show my wife like a tweet that I love, and she's like, this is why I hate Twitter. That is deliberately obscure. I have no idea what's happening there.
Yeah, context.
Yeah, there's a cultural succession. Now you know what it's like for me when people talk about movies a lot. Like, who's that?
Greg does not watch movies.
Or the other way around, try to... I don't fully understand the idea of when asking my father how he worked maybe in the 70s or something as a chemical engineer. I do understand the ideas of it, but did he open letters in the morning, read the letters, and then answer them first? Or like, how did that work?
How many types are involved? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Things change.
But yeah, things change. But so Noah, we talked quite a lot yesterday. We were talking about your some of your recent projects. There's a really interesting one. Maybe you can talk about it a bit more. That distributed lighting system that you built for the Rosetta Hall Club in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very, very rough cut of the case study. I'm not a great editor, and so this has been like pulling teeth for me. But this is as you said, a distributed lighting system. There you go. Wow, good time. That is made out of these modules, these triangular PCBs. There you go. That my good friend and collaborator David Crumley helped me get fabricated custom for this project. And that is the kind of module that composes these two platonic solids, which are the two simplest shapes that can be made out of triangular faces. And the definition of platonic solids are these are the kind of 5 fundamental geometries that can be made out of polygons that have regular proportions that are, a square or a triangle, equilateral triangle, etc. So this whole project, the notion was inspired by a much simpler version of a similar thing that I did for a club that's now gone in Brooklyn called Glasslands. The owners of Glasslands then became Elsewhere, and for their place, I made a thing that it's made out of cardboard mailer tubes, very cheap. We soaked them in flame retardant, but they were like hanging clusters all over the ceiling like stalactites, and they had LEDs in them and diffusion at the end, and we made a mapping system for them. And then the owners of this place had seen that, and years later reached out about helping them make some kind of signature moment in the main hall of this food hall and nightclub in Boulder. And I think I mentioned to you that their whole security team are like world-class b-boys. So there's like a lot of breakdancing that goes on. Mm-hmm. It was kind of an interesting cultural experience for me because I spent 15 years in New York, and at the time that they reached out to me, my understanding of what club culture is like was from New York or like Berlin, maybe experiences in Montreal or something, where the aesthetic is, as a friend described it, grown and sexy and kind of like dark, and minimal. And like my favorite references for that were like Output in New York, RIP, was a club that had everything in the club could light up. Like everything was an RGB LED, but they were almost never on. Like, and certainly not two things at once. Like just over the course of spending 3-4 hours there, you might see something out of the corner of your eye and it's gone in a moment, but you're like, oh, that entire column lights up, or whatever it is. So I was departing from this idea of like something super, super minimal and very durational. And we kind of met in the middle because, the point of that was that I learned that, it's not that way everywhere. And some people like a better lit dance floor. My rule of thumb was if you can tell if you're attracted to the person you're dancing with, then the lights are too bright. And certainly if you can tell if you're attracted to the person across the room, the lights are way too bright. They wanted them a bit brighter than that. But I did win out on absolutely no green light at all.
Yay. Ugh,
It's hideous.
worse.
Which was a bit of a color
Worse.
challenge. But this system is unmanned in the sense that it runs durationally over really, I mean, it's on every night that they have a dance party, and it's permanent, so it'll be running for years. And it has these, the second line on the About page of my website is that we make installations and digital objects with complex inner lives.
Yeah, that's really good.
Complex inner lives is the point. And that being that, like, if I install something that's permanent and that the owners of it, the people that live with it, are going to have to be in the same room with it for hundreds or thousands of hours over the course of its and their lives, I really want to encourage closer inspection and not create something that shows all its cards ever, especially not front, and that is constantly holding back and constantly hinting at a depth that you feel that you never truly understand or see.
So what kind of control system did you leave with them so they can kind of adapt or tweak things from day to day or week to week kind of thing?
Yeah, the learning experience between Glasslands and this project was, well, I did a piece for KEXP in between that's pretty similar to these, but it's the background of KEXP's like live performances, and it's 3 walls, but it's similarly like a low resolution LED screen lighting hybrid thing. But all 3 of them have a controller that the client can use. And the mistake that I made in Glasslands was I made this hyper granular controller where they didn't have a lighting guy, and it was really the sound person was supposed to be using this controller if they wanted. And the thing would do its own thing, but it was made so that they could make their own looks, like from scratch. And it was overwhelming. You know, honestly, like it was like very idiosyncratic and certainly could have been better designed. It was done in jitter, so it was like the interface was insane. Which is not to say that they all have to be insane in jitter, but I didn't do a great job of the interface. Anyway, the lesson that I learned from that to KEXP, and then I carried over to this project, was give them some looks, some presets that are beautiful. Give those presets emergent, durational, generative behavior that plays out over, you know, epochs, you know, like 1,000 years, so they never see it do the same thing twice. Mm-hmm. And then give them high-level controls about the things that they care about. So like brightness, if they want to lock the hue shift and then lock it to a certain color, because places like this get rented out, so they might want to go, you know, this client's color is teal, and just leave it teal tonight, something like that. Give them looks that they can, you know, control really specifically, but then mostly load it up with looks that drive themselves. This is all audio analysis. I had a version of this that, well, I had a toggle on the original interface that you could turn off audio analysis, and I realized I had like more than doubled my workload per look that way, because the audio analysis one is one, you got to tune that, and you know, this is in Colorado again, like they play country music in the club, you know, like I can't count on 4 on the floor to drive these audio looks. So there's that. And then there's also trying to do the version that doesn't use audio and do that. How are we going to do that with LFOs or whatever it is? It's just more than double the work. So I during the commissioning, I was like, hey, I know I gave you this switch. Can I take it back out? And they were like, yeah, sure. I'm trying to open 8 kitchens here, you know, and do what you got to do. So it's all audio analysis, and it's all also in parallel to that driven by these durational behaviors. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that, you know, I probably in a New York club could have gotten away with that I had to tamp down in this one is that originally in the behaviors of these things, it was deliberately designed so there's long periods of darkness. It's just dark because there's not lights in the space. Like this system controls, as you can see, hue lights. Every single lamp in the entire place is a hue light. So it also controls the whole clutter. The bar cloud of the bar, and all the beams, and the lights in the kitchens, and the lights in the bathrooms are all driven by the system. So there's always some light, but I have the pendants going out a lot. And these things that you see it doing for the case study I was just talking about this today. Like, it almost never does those things. Ever does that bright white, like intense stuff that's going on in the video. Came out to document it, and I had to like go in under the hood and kind of like push it into these corners that it only does once a million years, because otherwise the video would make it look like the most boring club lighting system ever. But in my opinion, like it's a very tasty kind of hyper minimal thing that I think really works well in person. But in the context of a 60-second video with 4 on the floor music playing, if I let it be as meditative and contemplative as it normally is, you would be like, music would change, like what's going on?
Yeah, for these kind of systems that you you deliver to a venue, where the venue operators don't have a lot of time to tweak things, you mainly want to give them 2 main sliders. One is more and less.
Yeah.
And the other one is faster and slower.
Yeah.
And just with those 2 things, you can get some really interesting combinations that really suit the vibe. It just takes 2. And so if you just keep that in mind as you're designing things and what you deliver, and as long as you know what those 2 controls do, then anybody going up to it can go, yeah, cool. That's the way it is now.
That is great. Yep. We try to approach that. There is a speed slider. It doesn't really mean much in the audio analysis context. But the idea of just more and less and like faster and slower is how we approach KEXP to a degree. Because originally, believe it or not, we did not have audio analysis built into that design, even though that's like it only accompanies music. And that worked out pretty well. I think the other thing, obviously, is just letting them either having it cycle through presets or letting them lock it to a preset, which, as it turns out with these guys, really, they know them all by name. Like everybody in the club knows all the presets in this by name. And when they came back to me this year to hire me on to do more looks, they could like tell me exactly what they liked about every look and like what behaviors they had seen it do that they wanted more of and those kind of things. Oh, I should also mention with this, the thing that was interesting to me that I think TouchDesigner folks might find interesting is that there was a forum post, I feel like it was like Bruce Wheaton or somebody like a long time ago. That's someone in the TouchDesigner community? Remember that name that? Yeah.
Bruce Wheaton,
I think, I'm not sure it was him, but somebody posted a thing a long time ago that was preceded the UV Unwrap in rendering in TouchDesigner. And that actually, the UV Unwrap came out as I was commissioning this project, but I started the code on it about a year before that. And anyway, I wrote this thing that kind of adapted that, and it unwraps every model in a scene into my Flatpak UV texture that I use to do one of my flavors of mapping in this thing. The way this thing works is it ends up, of course, as a one-dimensional top that goes out into DMX land in 16-bit, and then it gets diced into 2 8-bit ones and all that. But there's a 2-dimensional version that gets turned into 1-dimensional, and there's a 3-dimensional version that you can slice in all ways to get into the 2D to get into 1D. But there's a version of it that you take a scene and render it unwrapped, and each fixture unwraps into its place in the grid of the UV Flatpak that goes in 2D pixel mapping.
Pixel mapping, in 2D.
Yeah, and that thing allows you to light the lights. So the lights themselves are physical, orbs kind of hanging in the air in a space, and of course they shed light. But you can then, with this, you could put like a FONG material on them or a PBR material, and they can have lighting, and that lighting can appear to hit all of them, so that it's as though there's a light in the room that you can't see that's causing these to have modeling and have like a shadow side and be shining light towards the virtual light that is not visible. So you can put that virtual light in the middle of the dance floor, and all of the fixtures will then have shine on the inside face to the center of the dance floor and shed light in the center of the dance floor.
Right.
It's kind of an interesting like backwards thing where like the virtual light in TouchDesigner becomes where the light goes, because the way it lights these 3D models becomes emissive light going back in the direction.
Hey Noah, what are we looking at here? just to change, just to.
Oh, no problem. This is a project
So,
that I did
yeah.
with AV&C.
Yeah. Did you actually work with AV&C for a while, or were you just brought on for
I've
project?
done 4 or 5 projects with AV&C over the years, including like last year I did a thing with them that I'm
right.
talk about. But I still hope to continue working with them.
David B is amazing.
Yeah, they're like, as far as the type of shops that I work with, I think they're like the one that understands what I do the best and kind of uses me the best effect. So this project, I was the technical director on it, and as you can see, it has big LED screen. It's got water, which is insane, inside the LED screen. It's got ferrofluids, and it has this big kind of connect moment. And I did the connect graphics as well, which is like, as you can see, like a solenoid kind of particle system with trails and things like that. Will Adams was the creative director for the Mill on this. The Mill was the intermediary client between AV&C and Accor Hotels, which is this hotel. And the way this thing worked was they brought people in, put this EEG wave tracker on them, and put them through this live to camera, live to tape experience of going through these moments, and then
you were capturing their biometric.
Capturing the biometrics, and Mike Manworth, it's also in TouchDesigner, that generates this kind of reaction diffusion kind of graph based on those inputs, and then they get this big, gorgeous printout, which was actually like the hardest thing in the entire project. Eric Alba, the producer, God bless him, it fell to him to do these gorgeous, like, giant Epson prints of these takeaways for these influencers, like while they were on site, and the color. You know how it is when you're trying to print like a nice colored thing. It's a nightmare. He hadn't slept in weeks. There's the ferrofluids. What a nightmare. I tried to talk him out of that like a billion times. But, yeah. The thing was, we had to reset that every time, and it's sandwiched between 2 pieces of borosilicate glass that have to be perfectly clean and have to go in and like not squish the ferrofluids. And then there's magnets like in that really cool object the Mill had made, this acrylic. It's the ferrofluids, as I said from the very beginning of the project, it's like the child on set, or like trying to like shoot a movie with a dog.
Just scratch that off of your off of the list of things that you're willing to do.
I was like, you guys are the Mill. Like, why don't you just do this in do this in post? You guys are, one of the best effect shops in the world.
Well, they wanted to branch out.
So. I wouldn't mind. Do you guys want to start talking about elsewhere? And question I don't know the answer to is, how did you just said you did lighting for one of their other properties before, so that's how you originally hooked up with them. But how did that whole show come about? How did that idea? I mean, it really is sort of a COVID solution to sort of feeling isolated and having a show kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Elsewhere, more than being a club, is kind of the focal point of a community. They're like, the most, in my opinion, kind of serious and yet inclusive and diverse music promoters as Pop Gun and venues in Brooklyn. And that's really saying something, because like their neighbors are places like House of Yes and stuff. Like House of Yes is also extremely diverse and inclusive and the focal point of a community, but they're in a different direction. They're kind of more of like a performing arts that's not totally centered around music. Elsewhere is that equivalent for music. They had this group that's in their immediate, 50 block radius. That's probably 500,000 people that are missing live music. But then worldwide, they are known. They are the largest seller, I believe, of tickets of all independent venues in the world. And they had to come to a screeching halt, when it became unsafe to see live music. And we, early in COVID, it was like March, we were, Jake, one of the owners, is one of my best friends, and we were immediately starting to talk about all the responses that we saw on the internet to how do you interpret the problem opportunity of reproducing the experience of seeing live music during COVID on the internet. And a lot of what we saw was, make a 3D model of a festival stage and like put the talent on a video billboard on the festival stage and then like you could have like a virtual LED screen behind them with an iMag camera, and then you as the avatar can kind of be an ant in the crowd and kind of go around, and that's fine, I guess, but it felt very Second Life in like late 90s to me. It was like, why are we trying to recreate the real world when this is our like big opportunity to, this was my experience from the beginning of COVID, and I think it's still true, is that COVID has made people much more willing to focus on a small screen for a long period of time because they just don't have, there's no FOMO from the real world. You know, our attention spans for Zooms and for small screen activities are longer than they were previously. And at the same time, people are thirsting for experiences that are outside of their lived experience. A lot of people are cooped up in small spaces and stuff like that. And I just don't, I think it's a totally missed opportunity to be like, well, here you are like at a low poly festival, like kind of milling around in a crowd, and it's just like a real festival. It's like, well, it's virtual. Why wouldn't it be in space? You know, or like, why wouldn't it, you know, a lot of people reference, and I think rightly so, how different it felt, those early Fortnite concerts, like the Travis Scott one, where they were pulling on the levers that you can pull on, like scale or displacement or, you know, the impossible, you know, like kind of multi-dimensional impossibility is the promise of, I think, virtual experiences. Not like, oh, I can, you know, build a ranch house on a private island to scale and charge rent. Like the Second Life thing, I didn't get it. And like to go back to that, to the live music thing, just didn't make any sense. So Twitch was really cool. Like they came in like early and gave us some support with some strings attached. They were basically like, it's got to be about music. They really want to develop their kind of music side of things, and it's got to be, you know, featuring pretty big talent. Our first episode was with Princess Nokia. But originally what we told them we were going to do was a virtual production thing, basically like an hour-long music video of like really high concept music videos, potentially with segues between them, moving camera, green screen, big crew, stuff like that. And we got very seriously into that process before I, as the technical director, kind of came to the team, and I was like, hey, so I'm not really great with Unreal, and I don't know anybody who is. Like, I honestly don't. At least not anybody that doesn't have a full-time job. So
what are you saying? Hang on.
Yeah, how are we going to do this? And like for any amount of money, we just can't. There's the Unreal talent is hard to come by, and it's slow going in Unreal compared to working TV. And you know, we had already this was a collaboration with friends, but we had already started working with my friends at Dark Igloo on kind of some of the creative for this. We were working with my friend Will Adams, who was the creative director on that Accord thing, who had just left the mill. And I kind of said to everybody, I was like, I know, you know, you don't have any reason to know what I'm capable of with this yet, but if you take my word for it, I promise you, like, I can take this on solo in TouchDesigner, and we can do anything. And they were like, well, like what? And I was like, anything. And they were like, I mean, I was like, I can pretty much promise you yes is the answer. Like, I'm not gonna cut anything out right now. Let's just start brainstorming. But everything is on the table. And so we just started going nuts from a creative standpoint, like in terms of, you know, what if there were all these cameras and all these different spaces and all these different scenes and all these different ideas kind of jammed into one show, where our influences were the Sushi Dragon and Space Ghost and Danny Does It, and like this kind of combination of Eric Andre show, this kind of combination of like gonzo public access vibe with contemporary Twitch aesthetics. And we really realized that this was an opportunity to do a Twitch-centric show, which we were like, why are we on Twitch if we're going to make a show that's not interactive? So we took Twitch really seriously as like a suite of, granted, a really strange grab bag of like interaction mechanisms, but like, how do we make a Twitch-native, like really interactive show where the magic is that you feel like you can like tap on the glass and official look at you, you know, like that thing times a million. With like a really free-form kind of punk rock vibe, felt to me like the best fit for TouchDesigner, because I knew that I could move really, really fast, build tons of stuff for every episode, and I can fix it if I don't finish it before we go live. Like I can literally like fix it live, which I did in almost every episode. I ended up doing.
It looks like we're attaching an effect to Greg right now.
Yeah, like, what have you done to Greg? Greg, are you
I'm
doing?
freaking out.
Are you doing updates or something?
No, I'm freaking out over what Norman said.
It looks like a poorly trained machine learning, like a game.
Yeah.
So for this project, no, you took on a lot. I mean, you're a touch designer, system designer, building the infrastructure for the show, and you're the art content maker, making a lot of the shots and looks and composites and stuff like that with the help of your friends at Igloo.
Yep.
And during the show, you're the show director. You're going from shot to shot, and you're mixing things like a VJ. And at the same time, you're also the off-screen jokester, conversing with the host. So it's you've done kind of a lot of things within one show. And like you said, you'll take it all on as a one-man show. So, and it turned out quite well. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a bit. And also the show is not a fixed sequence. It has a rough sequence, but it doesn't quite always go. Well, there's a lot of branch points and stuff like that.
I put just to mention, I put your screen up, Greg, if you want to skip through a couple of parts already.
Show what it looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing, like, I've done a number of jobs as a television technical director, which is to say, like, operating like a big Grass Valley or like TriCaster switcher. So I'm pretty familiar with like the experience of like looking at a live camera, looking at a preview scene, building a shot, and then taking it live at the right moment, and like being on calm in some way, like in people's ears, to like tell talent where we need to be. And that was originally, like, up to the night before the first show, that was the way we were going to do it. I was actually just going to be in the IFB for the talent. Peter, she was the host in the first two episodes, and I was just in her ear and in the guest Princess Nokia's ear for rehearsals. And the night before, we thought, like, I think we need another voice on the air. So I was on mic as well in this character that eventually evolved into somebody named George, because Princess Nokia named George for some reason. And it was great because that provided like a foil for the character of the leader, who's a cult leader. Maybe I should give the backstory real quick. There's this cult that's in a spaceship that's in exile, hurtling away from Earth. They were banned from Earth because of something that the leader's father did, the founder. He and the cult did something terrible in the 90s that got them banished from Earth. But they had so much influence that they were able to determine the terms of their banishment, and so they're in a spa ship. But only the leader is in the front of house part of the spa, in the part that's like really nice. Everybody else who's off camera is in like some either bureaucratic hellhole, like some kind of industrial, like blue collar, like, steam
Orwellian
thing, including George, and their lives are pretty clearly terrible.
Miserable, yeah.
Sound cult, and once a month, a moon moves into position such that they can get messages back and forth to Earth. They can have a brief, like 2-hour-long connection with Earth, and they beam someone aboard the ship as a cultural exchange to do some performances and to hang out with the leader, because the leader's bored, especially because almost everybody on the ship is frozen. So that's the story. And they get some voicemails from Earth where, like, they hear from all these vendors that still work for them that were hired by the founder back in the 90s. Most of them are in Florida, and like, they have all these headaches with like money and HR and legal, and the leader doesn't want to hear it. I in terms of like actually running the show, that's trying to push the story forward as that character. We knew that the talent playing the leader would change from show to show, so we needed somebody who was really intimate with the story, which of course I'm very close to.
Sounds like it's you.
Yeah.
So let's walk through an episode. This is episode 3 with Star Child. So all the episodes start off with
you're gone.
Your mic got quiet, Greg.
Yeah.
Okay, my mic got quiet. Sorry.
Yeah.
That works again.
Yeah, so all the episodes begin with where you're trying to make contact with Earth. You're waiting for that 2-hour window, and eventually you do make contact, and you see, the host gets to see the chat, the Twitch chat on the left, kind of thing, and starts chatting with them. And there, you want to make also contact. Well, one of your guests, your guest was magically arrives on the ship at some point. So
It's unclear how.
What's that?
It's unclear how. We never really.
Yeah, it's unclear how he gets there, but you do a bunch of affirmations with the Twitch feeds and stuff like that. So that's all kind of live composited, and then you bring somehow your guest magically appears on ship with you. And then they get a chance to perform a couple of their songs. So every song you do is uniquely made for that one song. So it's like a music video that probably you prepared in like 2 hours or something like that. But
That's about right.
So really, Jesus, incredible. The whole songs were a look per song. So.
I also like how you made such good use of existing community assets and things out there. Working at that speed, just bringing things in and.
Yeah, like this is Matthew Regan effect, right? That you adapted.
Mike Walsick, did this song.
Walsick, that's right. There's that.
The God Rays thing, and the shapes back there are from the Pixel Spirit deck. I have on my desk, but it was getting too much sun. But I literally went through real quick one afternoon and wrote the entire Pixel Spirit deck into a shader, and then I'm picking out components of it because it's GLSL functions that'll make these shapes with a scale.
Right.
I added a scale parameter in order to move the UV like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, these things are, as you said, put together in almost no time. And a lot of it was me. I keep my palette tight, and I knew certain things. You just, if you're paying attention to what's going on in the community, there's certain tools that come up where I'll be in the middle of a project where I can't touch them, but they'll make an impression on me to the extent that it's hard to be creative under fire. But if you have a kernel of something where you're like, oh, I know this effect is cool, that's a great starting place. This God Ray thing became these are on the this is music analysis going on, so these come out on the kick. So this kind of really rhythmic feel, and then every 4 bars they slurp away into the background and a new shape comes out, and it has a very timed feel. But super simple thing once you have the God Rays.
That's great.
So third song he does is Starfield with something on the treatment you do on the foreground.
Mm-hmm. I think this is the same kind of electronaut flood effect. It's basically like a displacement with a feedback, but the kernel of it is a particle system that's in one spot. And when you first build the effect the way he's explaining to build it, you're like, I'm going to put a pin in that particle system idea because I'm pretty sure that's not necessary. I don't understand why that would be important. And then I tried it other ways, and it flat out does not work. It needs
some food.
It needs a seed that originates from one spot,
right,
and that kind of randomly spreads out across the screen, but doesn't do that in a uniform way. And it's funny because a lot of his stuff is clearly the result of a lot of experimentation, and then stripping back something that was probably a mess into the kernel of it that actually makes the effect. Mm-hmm. And that's really impressive. K-12 is the same way. Both of them are displaced top geniuses that I cannot, I'll make a mess in TouchDesigner and then I can't take it apart without breaking it. But they both have the ability to go oh, I see what makes this, and these really delicate arrangements too. If you need one parameter that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's a balance.
Where he's flooding in on the beat from spot is that effect, and he's actually a plane in 3D space. And I bought these camera recordings. It's a chop, or it's also Houdini chop info too. It's in a bunch of formats, but it's just a telemetry of a recording of somebody holding a camera in 6-axis space, He's just standing there, and it gives you this kind of breathing camera. If you do a lookup into it in your camera transform and just do it like real slowly. So that's what's going on here. And then that in the background is Particles GPU, I think, and I'm just like spading that into like a hoop, a circle, and then SOP, and then back out into the. I'm just forcing all the particles to go into a hoop and then letting them come back out.
Yeah, I think someone posted the that camera movement component from Houdini, I guess it was originally, on our community post a few weeks ago.
Oh, I learned about it from Elbers. Elbers is a friend.
Yeah, Elbers first discovered it, I think.
Yeah, it's a friend of his who's doing his Unreal and TouchDesigner tutorials. That guy sells those camera recordings for like $20 or something. Very helpful.
Cool. So then songs are over, and they get to kind of hang out together in different backgrounds. And at some point in time, you go over to the disco room. And
this started with the hollow deck, and it turned into the disco. The Dark Igloo guys were making sets like within the 48-hour window before the show. They were just cranking out sets before each show, and I would just get these Dropbox files and be like, "Okay, here we go." Like, these are part of the show now, you know, and then make a foreground look, a treatment, you know, that like puts them in the set if possible. But this was time turned into a discotheque like in an hour.
Awesome. So explain a couple of the graphics here. We have well these three elements here. So and the ticker tape at the bottom.
Yeah, the ticker is a ticker, but I could go into some detail about how much hair I lost over that.
Yeah, we can. Maybe when we get into the networks.
Yeah, the interactions that are on screen, there's two of them right now. The simple one in the top right, the turbulence, well, it's a bits meter is what we call it. It's like a telethon. Somebody gives us money, bits or money, like real money. That the difference between bits and real money is that Jeff Bezos gets a taste, but basically, I think you get you can give shows money directly as tipping, and so that meter will show up sometimes with that's like $15 or something, and as people give us money, it fills up, and when it fills up, it either triggers. We only had two things in it, but we had lots of plans for other stuff. But turbulence, which is totally like Star Trek, like the screen just shakes and it says turbulence on the screen, and the actors have to ham it up like the ship isn't flying right. Normally the leader will yell at me like I'm flying the ship, which I'm not. And then flashback was the other one. And the premise with that gag was just that the leader would like, you know, do some exposition about the history of the show before what we see. But that's just, yeah, there you go. Somebody just gave us some money. And then the bottom left.
Yeah, up here.
This is part of my kind of theory about how interactivity is best done for like large groups of people. But basically, this is voting. You can vote on 1, 2, or 3, and those are offerings for the leader and for the guest. And there you go. They just picked Dark Secret.
Yeah, I think we need to see this bigger.
Marcus, you want to make that bigger?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So the three options were Pleasure Cylinder, Dark Secret, and Hyper Mist. And the line, the horizontal line, is the threshold of consensus, meaning it looks like 50% of people have to agree on what they want. And we need, in this case, it looks like at least, I don't know why it says 10 out of 15. That's confusing. But what? Anyway, the idea was
it's non-linear.
The denominator of that is how many people have to vote in order for it to work. And then the numerator is how many people have voted. So people can change their mind, but the idea is that in the chat, they have to get together and agree on what they want to offer the leader. And most of, I mean, the Dark Secret is kind of the exception, but the rest of them are kind of prop gags, you know, like food that, you know, we had a thing called Freak Snack, and that was Pop Rocks. And we had Nutrient Block, and that was astronaut ice cream. We had Pleasure Taurus, and that was like a really cartoonish looking like Homer Simpson donut. And would offer the viewers would offer the acolytes. You know, the people who are watching the show are supposed to be like acolytes of the cult, and they would offer the leader and the guest things in worship, kind of.
Cool. And let's see. Then what happens? Then hang on. Whoops. Hang on.
The viewer.
A gazillion screens. Oh yeah, and then we get some incoming transmissions from
Earth.
From your hang on. Oops. Sorry about that.
Back at the beginning.
Yeah, here.
Yeah.
There you go.
This set was super goofy. I know that the flipping things around is super cheesy. It was just something about like the callback to the 90s VJ thing that we all thought was funny. And this is Paperboy Love Prince. The part of the thing that we made sure to get to in the call-in segments was to have the guest who was on the subsequent episode call in. This is pretty high concept. It never made sense, but like the idea was that they were calling from the future, having already done the show. But it was really just a way to promote the next episode. So Paperboy, they were the guest on the next episode, and they were calling in here. But yeah, the set is just super corny, like instanced thing, and we're using India.
Yes, that looks like about 3 stops and 2 chops. This one.
Yeah, it's a grid. The secret sauce to this, and to a lot of the way we kind of got lots of cameras into the show, was of course NDI, but also OBS Ninja in this case. So Jake, my collaborator on the show, was one of the owners of Elsewhere and like the kind of co-creative director and creator of the show, was also the call-in producer, and he was responsible for driving OBS Ninja to like get these calls in, of which we would have 3 or 4 or 5 on an episode. It's a lot of work.
Right. Really bring them in via OBS Ninja, and then we went off to hang out in the mud bath.
Yeah,
and we'll look at this stuff in detail.
That was my favorite one.
Yeah,
the disco was good too. Or no, actually, there's a lot of good ones, but this one was really good.
So yeah, this is the interaction. Is you can see it said hard work party there because I tend to jump in the chat and do the thing if nobody's going to do it. But if you type !Steam in the chat and you're a subscriber, it'll make a puff of steam with your name on it. There it goes. What is that? Pod? Oh, I don't know. Oh, Pod 2891. I don't know who that is. That person was very active that episode, though.
Okay.
Oh, and they just offered them a pleasure.
So that's their name. Oh,
yes,
there we go.
User's name.
That's good.
They're gonna.
And that's you will see that there's a NVIDIA Flow top making this puffs of smoke and stuff.
That's right. Yeah, it like bounces off the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
There's like screen space reflections on the walls, and that like I just made a 3D scene with planes where the walls are, and then textured them with the scene and cropped it so that it looks like there's a reflection, which actually is looking pretty subtle right now.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's even working this episode. Maybe I did it after this episode.
And get something gets wacky.
Somebody bought an absolution, so this was another interaction where people
that's what happened. They bought an absolution
to have the leader forgive them for something, and they could type in what they wanted to be forgiven of.
Cool. And back into a couple of songs. So
yeah. And
so this one's just a 3D track, and you're putting. I guess you're putting the talent on a billboard, and moving it in 3D and all that.
A lot of these scenes are a response to the fact that we only have the talent from like the thighs down or thighs up, so like it's kind of like, how do we creatively put them into worlds and take them far away without showing that we can't see their legs. In retrospect, I should have had the ground undulating in this one, just to give it a little more movement. But that's also screen space reflections.
And there's a Polygon World, and then this is a tribute to Dandy Does It.
That's it, yeah. Mm-hmm. Which the look on Starchild's face, on Brendan's face, when this he had seen it once in rehearsals, and then when this came on, you could see him remembering that this was this one, and how excited he is to do this.
Yes.
He's adorable. So
I'd be happy too.
Yeah, he's so good. He sold all these looks to such a huge degree. He was such a great collaborator. We couldn't have asked for a better guest. Like he really set the bar very high.
Yeah. And then Billiam's feedback is back here. Well. Yep.
Like straight up, just basically it's just that effect with the backgrounds are these textures. We have tons of stock footage that we use all over the place for just give it this like weird space spa vibe. And so those and the reset on the thing are on audio analysis. So this feels very snapshot, like right on the beat of the song,
Yeah.
and you can see Brendan again, like figuring out where the timing is, because there's a little latency from the camera and the audio and stuff. It's not exactly where you'd expect it to be, but he figures it out, and then he's like clearly trying to make images.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so rare that perform. Often when you see dancers with being tracked, usually the result of the track, the dancers can't even see because it's behind them, and often they don't care because they want to dance. And this is a really great instance where actually the performer is actually watching what the output is and is controlling it.
You can see him looking at it. Like it's a big TV that's underneath his camera.
Yeah.
And you can see him like trying to figure out, because I don't remember, I don't think his is reversed, but you can just see him like making images for this and for the one previous to it. He's deliberately putting on a show. Same thing with a couple of the other looks actually, where it's kind of spatial, and his body shape is really kind of critical to what comes out. He's the total package. I really didn't know his work before this show, and he made a huge fan out of me.
Fantastic. And so then, then it's time to say goodbye to him. So another effect comes on, and off he goes. And then something bad happens, and things get warped out.
Yeah.
Is this the flashback?
This is a flashback, yeah.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
And Peter made a decision early on to, every time there was a flashback, reminisce about the time that she took a bumper off a car in a parking lot or something like. And she did it every single time. And like by the third time, all of us in the back, because we're on a Slack during the show, like communicating with the team, like, is the next shot ready? Do you have the callers ready? Whatever. And we're like, the third time she did it, we were like, oh man, she just can't think of anything else. And then like the fifth time she did it, we were like, I have come around, and this gag is hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. And then the chat names gives a nickname for Star Child, and then we're starting to lose transmission because there are 2-hour windows up, and everything gets a bit foggy, and you hit the credits at the end. So that's how the show goes down, which is pretty nice sequence.
It's a very very nice little package, and it kept growing. I remember the third episode, you had added so much more content. Mm-hmm. So you guys going to go in and
so let's look at some networks
under the hood.
Yeah. So first let's look at the your user interface and while the show's on, while you're performing.
Yeah.
All right.
Marcus, do you still have me? Because my computer went to sleep a second ago.
Okay.
Do you still have me on Parsec?
1 second. Do I see you there? No.
Oh yeah. Parsec
wait, there it
looks
is.
Like but you do?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
If you see me connecting.
No? All right, hang on. It looks like Parsec quit. Here we go. Oh yeah, there you go. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
I was muted. There we go.
So,
great. So this is what you're controlling during the show.
Yeah, the nature of these things, like, I wish this was. You asked actually when I first showed you this was a touchscreen, and that's exactly what I was thinking. Like once we really got going in the show, I was like, oh, this should have been a touchscreen. But it's it's obviously all widgets, and I use a mouse on it. But then my hands then are free to use this Stream Deck, which I'm using for the kind of push buttons that I really need under my fingers. Mm. And I have a couple other things where I need continuous control, like knobs and faders on this cheapo nano control. But the nature of these things is like, it's a user experience, or it's a UI, UX kind of ongoing design process where fortunately I was also the operator. So I could move it at the rate of my ability to code, which with widgets now is like I can move very quickly with UI, and with the way that I built out the Stream Deck control and with everything kind of being exposed as a Python function, I can call anything from anywhere in the program. So these buttons on the Stream Deck can do anything. So from a UI standpoint, everything was pretty push button, which is pretty nice. And so while this view that we're looking at here is one part of it, like I also have the Stream Deck buttons and a couple knobs that kind of complete the picture. But this obviously is kind of built like a, if you're familiar with a broadcast video switcher, like that's what this is based on. It's an A/B deck where you have a preview shot that you're building, and then you have a program shot that's live, and you can obviously modify the preview shot, not the program. I mean, people who are watching the show can modify the program by taking interactions and stuff like that. Sorry. How do I do this? You think I know this by now. There we go. So this shot that's live here, you know, if I say I only want the subject, and forgive me for this test footage because it has a light in it, and there's a mic stand, something or other, and the key's not great, but yeah. I can pick, you know, one foreground element, and this shot is called A only here. This scene is A only, but I'll show how these connect in a minute. But I pick a foreground, I pick one or more foreground elements. So if I had a big A, small b, and I pick a B, there's a little B here. It could be host. So any of my 10 sources, and any of my can be on the A or on the B, and then they get combined with the background, which are these great assets that Igloo made, which is mostly made out of stock footage, and some like kind of trickery. Like if I go to the exterior, this is Elsewhere's logo turned into spaceship.
Just a comment on your interface. Nima is mentioning that it really looks like Touch 077. Was that intentional? Was that intentional?
That was before my time. I came in during 8.8. Actually, I peeked in during 7.7, and I couldn't find any like learning materials, so I stayed in Jitterland for a little while longer. So that was before my time. I don't know. Like, what about? I wonder.
But it does look like 77 because all the text is all the buttons are all different aspect ratios and stuff like that. It looks. Yeah.
This is like a byproduct.
Congratulations, retro.
At the beginning, this was like, you know, very logical, and then, as you said, Isabel, like we make tons of new content for every episode. So just like, I was just adding buttons left and right, and the color of these scenes ended up being a response in the last scene of my being unable, like under fire, to like find what I was looking for. This is too many buttons. In fact, there's scenes in here that we don't even use anymore that like I could.
Yeah, so it's definitely an evolved interface that you know, your space gets smaller and smaller for each button, and but it's just the way it is until you rearrange it some other time. But yeah, it all makes sense. And you start off trying to make the buttons big enough so you can run them with the touchscreen, but soon they become so small you can't.
Yeah, I should have done a touchscreen. The mouse definitely. I'm okay under fire, like live in the show and everything like that, but there definitely was some times where like I could feel my deltoid muscles tensing up because I needed to use the mouse to find something quickly. Yeah. And there's that kind of freeze that happens where you're like, I'm gonna hit the button, but I don't know where the button is. Like, if it was the touchscreen, I think I could have done that thing where you search with your finger and then just poke it when you find it.
Amen.
But anyway, this is almost all buttons. I mean, this is a drop down where I can pick the title cards that play, in between performances. And then this section over here is called FX because I never changed the name. But this is basically like all the stuff that goes up on top of the screen. So like, I don't know where. I guess I don't have the bug asset on this computer, but there's the logo and the ticker and the bits meter, which we talked about, and the pari mutual voting, or the kind of like consensus voting offerings, and the voting, which gets triggered by this with like a time. So I could say, how am I doing? And then it's like, great. And then like, die, and then this will play out over 45 seconds, and you can kind of see this thing going around. And then if people vote, this updates in real time, and then the result comes up. And if it's a tie, you don't see anything. I don't know why this title card never ended. But then I have these cuts, like I can do these. Title card got stuck. Okay. Well, let's find that together. Because we're gonna need that, I think. You guys.
Okay.
Look
Here
at
we
that.
go.
Really
Live diagnosis.
Titles. Stuck on. Switch. Enabled. Enabled. It's a constant, which is set to parent enabled. And so I need to stop. Op title stop, right?
Yeah.
Op titles stop. Normally I have a text word here, but I closed it for the purposes of this show. But op title stop. And we're back.
Okay, so that's amazing. So you have a global op shortcut for title, and you have a function that gets to you to an extension.
Yes.
And you can just run it in the text port without having to go to a folder or go to a component and find something and whatever. You do it all with. So we'll look at that in a few minutes. What the global op shortcuts are that you're using, but it's a great way to unify things. Anyway, back to this. Yeah, so you turned off the overlay.
Yeah, we missed the results of the voting, but you get the result. And then these things show up on the host and guest screens. So if I say, is this going to work? P codes, there you go. So this is what the host sees as playing the character of the leader. This tells them if anybody subscribed today. This is obviously the time of day. This is what the guest is doing. They can see the guest live. This is a message from me to the host. And then over here, if there's voting going on, excuse me, like these two kind of voting, the host sees those really big because they're hard to see on there. This screen is a 60-inch 4K display that's like right under their camera. But just because of the lens geometry and you know how it works with like keys, like you want to get pretty far away in order to keep the host in focus all the way through the focal plane. You want the focal plane to be deep enough that like from their nose to the back of their shoulder anyway, you have a nice crisp line so that you can key them.
So the camera's got to be way back.
Yeah, it's got to be pretty far away. It's not as far away as we would like. We did get the host almost head to toe, but the guest we couldn't get anywhere near. You can see this framing kills us. It's the best we could do. But like green screens, you just need a ton of space. I learned a lot about that. But anyway, this is what the host sees, and then this is what the guest sees. They have 4 screens. So this is a message from me. Again, the voting, really big. This is one TV that's like off to their right, and they can see themselves also off to their right. And then the chat. The host also has another screen that has their chat that's just running off like a laptop. And then the program feed, which is underneath their camera. And this all goes out there. This is a 4K texture that goes out to a data path and breaks out. It goes over SDI into the room and it breaks out from a data path out to the 4 TVs that are in their space.
Terrific.
And we were kind of inspired by the Sushi Dragon in the like getting surrounded by TVs kind of overwhelming like weirdo set thing, which definitely like you could feel that energy from the guests when they like kind of come out on set, and it's just this funny feeling of like being in a kind of Brazil like panopticon, or is it Brazil? 12 Monkeys and Brazil, I guess, kind of Gilliam-esque panopticon feeling where like everybody's looking at you, there's all these screens around you, all the screens are trying to get your attention, and you're being scrutinized. And like we really kind of wanted that energy on camera.
You gave 4 screens.
Yeah.
Instead of one big one.
Yeah.
Just to overwhelm them. Okay, I get it.
There's also a printer in that room. So this is the printer here, which is like a receipt printer.
Oh, yeah.
And that character is the founder who's frozen near death, which is an idea I got from the underappreciated Philip K. Dick book, Ubique. No spoilers, but there's a character in it who's frozen in cryostasis in like just before death, basically. And so they're not exactly all there. And so the founder, who's the man that did something terrible and founded this cult, believes that he's still running the cult from beyond the grave from his frozen cryopod, which was plugged in the room where the guest performs, and they can't move it because they can't unplug it. He'll die. So it has to stay in there, which means that when he has beef with what his child is doing, the leader, the guest has to get in between because he can only communicate through these printouts. So these long printouts come out, and then the guest is like, something just came out of this thing. And then the leader is like, oh, is that my dad, like, what does he want? And then they rip off the thing and they read it, and it ends up being this like prolonged fight. So this is this cheap receipt print I got on Amazon.
So click through a couple of scenes and show us like how a few of them are put together.
Sure, yeah. So obviously, like, there's these kind of really simple scenes, like Big A here, where it's just the two of them equal size. The eyeline one we were just looking at, which makes more sense with the chat. We moved this over here because it was competing with the guest image. But it's a little tight here. There's UI stuff over here. We never found a great place for this. But anyway, that's obviously just a 3D texture of a web comp. This doesn't make any sense with this, but Big A, small b happens after performances where the host, there's a million little hosts cheering for the guest. And then we have this punch in, which we do just for comedic effect from time to time. And then this one doesn't get used. And then we have this exterior shot, which we do when the host is being lonely, and we can change what goes inside of this. And so now we're getting into these ones that are colored here behave differently than the other ones. So these black ones, like, you can pick an A and a B for the most part and a background and just, you know, do whatever you want, you know, any A, any B, your call, whatever you want to do, and change the background. But these colored ones behave by different rules, even though they have the same kind of interface to the program, in that, like, the background isn't entirely used here, and the host and the guest kind of place, you know, sometimes you don't get to choose who's who. So, like, this two masks one doesn't work because this test footage isn't lined up, but this one would be aligned with the assumption that the host is always here and the guest is always here.
Yeah.
The one mask is always the host, and so they're lined up because it just has to work that way. Like, the shots aren't perfect. We have to just go through before the show to reach different heights. Peter, our first leader, is probably like a foot taller than Murray, who played our leader in the third episode. So we get these all lined up, and these are rules-based effects, basically, where, like, this always has the texture in the background. And then we have these ones where it's like totally predetermined. This is for Peter's opening number. The bathroom was a scene in episode 3 where the leader's really nervous, and Murray, he goes into the bathroom and is like trying to get advice from his spiritual advisor. He doesn't want anybody to know that he's a spiritual advisor because he's also a cult leader. But he gets a call from his guru, who, in this case, I don't have a guru, but his NDI call in, shows up on the shitter TV here, and get some spiritual advice. Similarly, the debate is this kind of like really dynamic scene. Peter here looks green because this was actually a green mop that had been shifted into purple, but it's a mop with sunglasses on. And this is a 3D scene with a moving camera that has foreground, middle ground, background, so that you get this nice parallax when the camera moves. And this was the great space debate from episode 3, where the leader and the Paperboy Love Prince, the rival candidate. I'm sorry, not the leader. The leader plays the mop, who's president of space, the evil space mop, and then Paperboy Love Prince, who's really a mayoral candidate in New York, who's our guest on the third episode, plays a rival candidate. Or, like, Paperboy didn't even really know that they were going to be involved in this debate. We just kind of sprung it on them. But that's that was the plot of this thing. I just broke off teams because NDI cam is like, there we go. Okay.
Okay, so let's dive in and look at some networks of how these things are put together, like your sources and all that.
Yeah, so I try to make this as straightforward for myself as possible. And this is kind of one of my theories about working on big projects, is like, you got to keep your ducks in a row and make things like hyper legible, even if they're not super clever, on the high level, so that you can work quickly and, like, not get yourself in trouble. And then you make, if you do that properly and you make an interface that works, and, like, you have a overarching logic that works really well, you can sandbox and kind of pen in messes. And then the messy spaces you can, like, put on your painting coveralls and, like, Jackson Pollock in there. And it doesn't matter what your creative process is like, because the output of that, typically that's like a top situation where you're making some kind of scene. The output of that is 1920 by 1080, 30 FPS, and, like, who cares how you made that? But, like, overall, you need to really be organized. So all of our inputs for the show come in just in this list, and we have these fallbacks for a lot of these things because we didn't end up doing them. This was a bunch of these IP cameras that we were using. This is the NDI caller coming in. We didn't end up using Unreal. We thought we might do some scenes in Unreal. And then, you know, our hosts come in and they I'm using fallback files here, obviously, but normally it would be SDI coming in from our cameras. And we just garbage mat them real quick. And I made this garbage mat that like makes a solid kind of similar key color all around the mat area, if that's what you need. And then those get pre-processed. I have this off right now, but those go into Notch where we do the keying. Notch is a great keyer. And I was doing face tracking, but I stopped because it's just far too expensive in Notch. And now it's built into Touch. But you can see I have my pre-keyed footage here that's just kind of in for testing. And a LUT if necessary. I was originally going to punch in on their faces with this funny kind of zoom in, dramatic look gopher thing. But it was just unreliable in terms of not always having face tracking when you need it. And so those come out and become part of my foreground source roster here, right? So I have the host and the guest. These are placeholders. We never got these cameras working. The Doge cam is this, you know, NDI cam on anybody's phone. So we ended up putting this on the DJ. We were going to put it on a dog originally. That's why it's called the Doge cam. There might have been a camera on me at one point. We didn't do that. And then the caller is the OBS Ninja NDI connection from this computer that we're talking on right now, actually. The chat is coming from my web comp.
Cool.
This is nothing, which I use for shots where I want to make sure that I don't have anything in the place of the other one. And then, of course, you're building up a program and a preview scene, so you need two sets of everything. And you toggle back and forth between which one you're changing and which one you're using live. And obviously, you don't change the one that you're using live. So currently, it looks like the lower, this deck is preview because I can change it right now, right? And then this is the program deck, so this is what's up on screen.
Right. And they're selected by, like, let me look at the expression of your select.
Honestly, I think it's just like switch.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just grab the source that you asked for.
Yep.
These get called by the buttons themselves in the UI. So the UI itself, in here, further, furthermore, still a bit further, and then B, which are identical. And then our sources, these guys call, whoops, that was it. They call foreground source select with their name, and then they say I'm the A, and then of course on the B side it would say it's the B.
Oh, okay, cool.
But
really, so it's just one command when you click
switch
with the variable with the switch, yeah.
I'm the A deck. That's who's calling you.
Terrific.
Pretty straightforward, and then so the background works pretty much the exact same way, except there's only one. You know, the backgrounds are just movie players for the most part. I mean, the texture one has a little more smarts because it's its own A/B switcher that goes back and forth between two assets. When I bang on the button, it just kind of randomizes which one it's picking from these stock footage clips.
Oh, I see. That's why you see them cross-fading every now and again. You actually are cross-fading between two clips.
Yeah, I'm just hammering on that just to keep some variety in some of those.
So these are all your backgrounds, I guess.
Backgrounds.
Where we are at now. So you have this background for A and background for B.
That's it.
And some of them are stills and some of them are animated. Like some of them have, like for instance, the when you're doing your affirmations, you have little flames going up on the wall. Is that all built into the After Effects loop, or?
No, that's a foreground effect. That's TouchDesigner. The backgrounds are all animated, but they're all just kind of, they don't even really loop. They just kind of twitch when they hit the loop point. And these are, Igloo made these in After Effects. And
those ones, that's what I meant.
It's all stock footage. Yeah.
Nice.
They did, like, this is an original 3D scene that I think TJ from the Igloo made, which again is the Elsewhere logo made into a spaceship, which is the ship that they're flying around in, which I thought brilliant, so smart.
I find it very convincing that you kind of all the imagery sticks sort of in a very compatible color
aesthetic,
aesthetic, and I mean you really sorry, my phone rang.
And you never overdo it with color, and
No.
it shows. It's really fantastic.
That's Dave Francesi from Dark Igloo. He's got like a genius color aesthetic. Like you can recognize his work from a mile away. And in fact, actually, we have a thing, one of our scenes, which is called Two Masks. Where is it? For Two Masks, here you go. We picked from these ramps, and like he just sent me 5 pairs of colors, and I was like, this is Dave Francesi in a nutshell. Like these colors are like his soul turned into a color palette. And this is what he sent me, you know, it was like, here, these are going to be the colors for the masks, and that makes these scenes where they look like this, you know. And so like every time this one comes up, those randomize.
That's terrific.
So and he made these. Wow. These are hand drawn. He's a brilliant illustrator and retelling.
Oh, that's fabulous. Okay.
Really pretty.
So that's how that's composed from colors that have been chosen for you.
So simple. Incredible. These all randomize every time, and this is that texture that we were just talking about. So when I hit the text button over here, every time I hit that, like this background changes. And these are just these gonzo stock footage things that, again, the Igloo brought together. This is a piece of sushi. You know, like it's pretty great stuff. It really, really gets the tone. This was kind of a creative thing that we never all the way got everybody where they wanted it. But like my original conception of the show and the way the system was built was that the host and the guest would be subjected to constantly changing context and would just have to react. And that would be driven by me just kind of like putting shots together and just throwing them up and like seeing how they react. And our original host, Peter, she's not really an improviser, and she didn't seem very comfortable with the notion at all of not knowing what was coming next. So it ended up being a partially scripted show where we kind of had beats, and then we would let the audience decide where we were going to go next in a lot of cases. But this part, what we call the 2 masks and 1 mask versions of these looks, were a response to my kind of really pushing for what I called the kind of more punk rock version of the show, where like things are just kind of crazy and like happening in nowhere space, and the host and the guest are like maybe faces floating. The original stuff that I made for this, like I had these scenes where like the guest was like in a circle, like their head was in a circle and it was like bouncing around on the screen, and the host was like standing on like an infinite terrain, and you know the guest would like come rolling in on a sphere or like rolling by, or like you know one of them was upside down, and just cartoonish like public access circa 2030 vibe that I thought felt really freeform and kind of twitch and like crazy and would give them a lot to react to. But through kind of negotiation with Peter and like have to have the Igloo like work ahead and make assets for the storyline that we wanted to tell and stuff like that, and to just be able to tell a story, we then kind of found a reason to go from place to place. So one of the things that we would put to a vote is like, where do we go next? And it would be one of these rooms: the aroma garden, the bar, the disco bath, mud bath, smoking lounge, tone zone, and that, you know, each of those places kind of had a something for the host and the guest to do when they were there, like
I see.
Dancing, or like
so this is where the choice is put up, and the votes happen, and then you have this scene ready to jump to once those voting results come in.
Right. This one now has the reflections. I thought I did the reflections in the Star Child episode. Maybe they weren't working for some reason, but my fake reflections here.
So do you want to go into some of the scenes and break them down as well?
Yeah. So that's the last piece of the puzzle here. We saw how foreground and background components get selected. They get put together in a scene. And this is, again, the same thing. We got program and preview. It's not necessarily this one and this one because it swaps every time I take. But like, this is what's going out. It happens to be the same shot right now. But if I were to put up the bathroom, so this is the preview right now, I guess. And if I take that, now this is the program. So then if I change the scene over here, that's going to change on this one. You get how A/B tech works, but that's what's going on there. And then that means that I have to have 2 of every scene for the most part. And the scenes can be really, really simple. They're just selecting, you know, their inputs, the background, the A and the B for the most part. And so if I look at like A only, it's pretty dumb, right? Here's A. A comes in, goes over the background, out you go. Couldn't be simpler. Now these, of course, every time I take to a scene, it asks the SFX MIDI thing to play the sound cue by its name, and that's how the sound gets triggered. But there are more elaborate scenes, obviously, where like this is what I was talking about with being able to make a mess. It's like this is kind of a mess for me. And this one has hard coded where the host and the guest go, because there, you can see that, you know, Peter's a pretty tall person, she's pretty tall. Jake is pretty short. Jake's about how tall, for example, Princess Nokia was, and even about how tall Brendan Starchild was. So if I just put them wherever, or if I tried to transform whatever A and B input I got and get them like so they look like they were in the mud bath, that of course wouldn't work. And of course Jake looks like he's drowning, but that's just because this test footage is crazy. But like, I needed to be able to say like, all right, for the purposes of the mud bath, you don't get to pick your A and B. It's always the host and the guest. They're always where they are. The host goes on. You know, I also don't want them to be able to walk in front of each other and stuff, although clearly you kind of can. But you know, put the host off to one side and the guest off to the other. Composite the scene together. And we have the flow. This is that steam that we talked about, which I think I can probably trigger if this is the live one. Let's see. No, it must be the other one. It's got to take it live. I see. So Mudbath will only puff steam if it's live.
Yeah.
So we send it live, and it might be the other one. It might be on the other deck. Yeah, we are.
Let's go to the other deck and check it out. Oh no, here it comes.
All right, yeah, just look at my FPS creator because we're in Parsec right now.
So that looks like one of the flow snippets.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, it's just like a sphere with a collider. This is the ceiling, so you can see that it kind of accumulates on a ceiling. And then it's gonna spreads out on the ceiling. Nice. And similarly, the name of the person that invoked that, see, it's gonna say hard work party. It goes up and it'll bounce off the ceiling too. Well, it kind of breaks up right before it gets to the ceiling. That was a whole thing to do that. And those both come out of the same kind of randomized spot. So that's Internet Explorer. That's Rami, one of the other owners of Elsewhere. I'm just randomizing it. But whoever invokes the Steam from the chat, their name goes into the thing, and the thermometer goes up. This is composited in post. Wow. And the temperature will go up and up and up as there's more and more steam until you're not allowed to puff steam anymore because it's too hot. And of course, this is in Kelvin, so it's like 140 degrees in there now or something like that. That'll go up and up and up, and then it'll kind of go back down after a while. Get a wolf pup, that's Jake. Yeah, so that's like an example of like make a mess.
Lots of logic.
Things really subtle. That's actually like a 3D scene where I'm like just making a rectangle for every wall and texturing it with the scene, and then I put them in, and then just make them really semi-opaque. So they just reflections is a stupid way to do it. It's cheap.
Good.
But yeah, that's an example of like a scene where like I go in and I make a mess. And it's also an example of a scene where like the behavior is hard coded, right? So like this one's always the host. Or no, I guess anybody could be in the silhouette scene. And take the A and I make them into a silhouette, and I do some like feedbacky stuff with the palette feedback, and then they become like a plane in 3D space that goes into an environment map and is really reflective. So there's a texture on them, and then there's a texture that they're reflecting, and pretty simple. But place where it gets crazy is inside the music. Let me just show the interface here. The music is its own set of rules, because for every episode I had to make between I made 4 for Paperboy, and I made 9 for Starchild music looks. So if I invoke the music here, these are Paperboy's looks, but these are each their own scene. So I needed more. This is just like an interface hack where I was like, how do I do this? So I have a selector for every music look that I made, and then the music scenes have their own switcher, because I can switch, you know, while they're on camera, I can like invoke another music scene, and there's like it randomly picks some kind of transition.
I see. So these are for the songs of the performer.
Yeah.
Specifically. Okay.
You notice that I'm not like cutting here. I'm not like, this doesn't live inside the switcher. It's its own little switcher. So music can stay live. I'll throw music up on the camera, and then while music is live, I can change songs while still building the shot that I need to come out of when the musical performance is done.
I see. Right.
This is like kind of breaking my own rules, but it was the only way to do this. So inside music is another A/B deck with transitions that are based on David Braun's phaser chop or phaser top, which I think this really should be its own top.
Its own top, yeah.
You guys have this in the, I don't know, it's in the op snippets. But like,
it's in the snippets with the chop and should be its own top, yeah.
Yeah, why not? Just get rid of this docked. Just hide this, and then now it is. But it randomly picks one of the textures that David made and does like a transition. But anyway, it's an A/B deck, and this is where I build up another set of scenes for that musical performance. And these are the ones for paper, and then these are all the ones for Star Child. I did not do the ones for Princess Nokia. They were done by another. They're just animations in the back. It'll be pretty clear if you look at that that they're not coming out of TouchDesigner. But so these are their own messes, like total mess.
Especially one-time only use messes.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. Which one is this?
This is the one with the car,
Oh my God! All right. So the car, talk about the audio analysis and the release of events which generate the boulders going by.
Yeah. So I have my audio analysis in another instance. It's here, and it's partially. I think there's audio analysis in the palette, and I expanded it with some more stuff. But that happens in another instance, and it comes in as this thing that every music look ingests right away to begin with. Where is it? Here you go. So I can just grab it anywhere, and I know I have all these channels in here, like kick detection, snare detection, etc., and like these ramps that take place over 4 bars, over 16 bars, over 64 bars, etc. And I use those to kind of drive things like, for example, a cam blend. So this is gonna change between looks every 4 bars. It'll change between camera angles. And it's also driving instancing of, as you said, like I went on like freefbx.com or something and just got like this is a rock and the satellite dish and stuff like that. And these I grab a trigger like a kick or a snare, they go into a new event, and then I grab the time out of that, and then I rearrange that time, and I use that as transform data for like I'll look up into a pattern where in this case it's like making something go off into the Z plane, and in that way with the event chop I can have as many of those as like if it takes 7 seconds for it to play its animation and there's a kick coming every 2 seconds, then there'll be like 3 of them on screen at any given time.
Yeah, so the event chop creates samples which last for, as he says, 7 seconds in this case, but once 7 seconds passes, that event disappears from the chop, but it'll get amended by new events that come into it. So it's good for instancing.
Yeah, it's great for like an ADSR on something that is audio driven. If you want to like connect something to the audio, it works really well for that. So these satellite dishes and these seagulls, which are insane, and these rocks are all instanced on like the snare or the kick or something like that. And the car is bouncing on the bass, and the headlights are flashing on the snare, and the tail lights are flashing on the snare. JP's test footage is walking out of the car, but the talent didn't do that in the show, thankfully. Although paper was very hard to contain. They really didn't want to stay on their mark at all, which made me change a lot of how I design these looks. But this is all made out of like freefbx.com or whatever in like a very, very short period of time.
A very, very slick aerodynamic car as well, I must say.
I love this car. And this uses
F1 material.
I'm going to blank on his name again, so give me 1 second because I kept his GitHub open. I thought I did. Oh, Isabel, help me out. Do you remember his name? TouchDesigner.
Hang on, I'm going to have to go through my history.
TouchDesigner post effects.
Oh, that would be Yoshi.
Hoshino. Masahiro Hoshino. Strongly recommend.
Yashihiro Shino.
Yep. These are like GP Gen stuff for the most part, ported to TouchDesigner. very, very useful packages. No documentation on them, not really needed. They're like self-explanatory, which is incredible. I mean, there's documentation in the GitHub, but like in the actual things that you bring in the toxes, there's nothing. But there's a bloom, there's a camera motion blur, which is very cool, and we used in this bed effect that I'll show in a second, this bed music video. But this uses the matrix of the camera, transform matrix of the camera, and caches the previous frame with a feedback chop, and it calculates the difference and uses that to make a screen space blur based on the movement of the camera from one frame to the next. It's a very clever approach.
Amazing.
Not what you would think of as motion blur in that, like if the camera's static and something goes through the frame, it doesn't blur at all. But if the camera moves relative to that, you get a blur. So you just got to shake your camera. Great depth of field, although I do use Swaggy Bokeh more than I use this. This I don't use like chromatic aberration, stuff like that. You can roll your own if you want that stuff. This screen space ambient occlusion is actually very good. It's different from the one in TouchDesigner in a way that I can't articulate. There's some Z fighting even on the image here. Screen space reflection is quite impressive. This is basically just like you give it all the color buffers from your scene, and it'll make a screen space reflection. It's fairly high quality, but really, really hard to work with. So I only use this occasionally. But I did use this on some of the looks, especially in the Star Child episode.
So is it his stuff shaders plus a bunch of tops that kind of augment it?
Yes. Typically, like almost all of them ingest the depth and the render, and those are the inputs to, a shader that's like
nice
ported from GPU gems, pretty much.
Yeah.
So these are.
Nice.
But they're really cleanly implemented and very easy to use. This is also his bloom, which I normally use the palette bloom, but it has a lot of parameters that I don't always use. This was just a quickie bloom that's not that expensive. It's taking about 0.6 milliseconds.
Yeah, just 4 parameters.
This is, by the way, one of the, you mentioned yesterday that there's one artifact in here where you can see some pixel lines, and you were wondering.
Oh, yes, the one. Yes. So here he goes right here. You see that?
Yeah, and that is introduced by it's just looking at it a bit, it's introduced by the ambient occlusion network.
I think it's in my render.
And it's...
Oh my gosh, you're right.
And it's... But you can kind of cut it away when you go into the material. Or in the material for the person walking, for the talent,
really?
For the guest.
Yeah.
Because you're discarding pixels there.
Yes, I am.
And you gotta discard a bit more. Basically, not just 0, but turn up the alpha threshold a bit, and you can get that.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I just feel like I'm hacking something that I should have set correctly when I do that. But I do that all the time with chroma key stuff. It just always felt to me like a smell, if you know the phrase. Like it felt like I was doing that because I had set something wrong.
Yeah,
but it works, and clearly that worked. And thank you for looking at that, because I didn't realize that it was coming in from the ambient occlusion. I assumed it was in my render. Much better. Thank you. Look at that. Wow, look at that. I mean, the notch key is incredible because
totally photorealistic. Amazing.
Oh, it's totally convincing. Our notch, our key, our chroma key is, it's lit to the best of our ability. We don't have a lot of money for lights. Our talent, not very well lit. Our cameras are okay, but they're not very sharp. And like the notch key, I set it like once before the first show, and I like never touched it again. Different talent, different outfits. They kept moving the lights because they were renting out the space in between shows. They come back in and like reset the lights, and they're totally different. And I spent the first like 4 hours of every shoot like putting the lights back where we had them, and like getting the camera settings back and everything. But the notch keyer takes anything you throw at it. I can't say enough good things about it.
Nice.
Even though it's, the notch integration was difficult at first. Once I got it set, it was like perfect. So this is the one with the screen space motion blur, which is off for the moment. I'm not sure why. And then there's a bloom filter. No, that's running. Okay, I see. All right, I just got to put this one live on screen. Here we go. So this one.
Okay.
Yeah, like the camera's shaking on the bass. This song is Gotta Do the Math. Paperboy was on Andrew Yang's campaign for president, and they did the song "Got to Do the Math" for Andrew Yang's campaign. That's
wow!
Don't ask me why there's a bed.
What a team!
This came to me when I was thinking about like how do I hide the talent's thighs. And with paper, with the framing, it worked out great. That like it just looked like they were like in the bed, and that you couldn't see their legs because they were walking around on the pillows. This came to me like right after the second episode where I was like, God, I really got to come up with better ways to hide their legs. So I was like, oh, what if they were in a bed?
So the blur, motion blur is the one you were showing earlier on?
Yeah, it's the camera motion blur, which takes as an argument the camera and your renderer. And what it does is it grabs the inverse view projection matrix from the camera, and I'm pretty sure caches it.
Wow.
I thought in order to diff from one frame to the next.
Yeah.
I thought that's what it was doing.
So it's figuring out the transform change from one frame to the next.
Right.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. To get a angle of rotation that's.
Oh yeah, here you go. This is doing the diff of those two. So you're getting the slope, for every pixel.
Oh, for every pixel.
And then that's used for a blur.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So works pretty good. You can really crank it up actually, which I have it. It's super cranked here. And the camera really starts bouncing around, like you get some cool blurs. And then I normally use Swaggy Bokeh. Oh, I am using Swaggy Bokeh. This is just sitting around for depth of field. And then I'm doing my usual like cam blends. What's going on? This has a look at problem, but I'm doing my usual cam blend where actually what I'm doing is blending between pairs of cameras. So like this one's slightly more zoomed in than this one. This one's slightly to the right of this one, I think, and like whatever. And then I'm picking pairs of cameras and like blending between them on the base. So it's like
I see.
Between two camera positions in order to get that.
I get it.
You know, from a creative standpoint, it was easy for me to be like, I want this to be stronger or weaker, and I could just grab the second camera because the first, the odd ones, 1, 3, and 5 are the baseline camera, and then the base makes it go towards 2, 4, or 6, depending on which camera you're looking at. And so I could just make it stronger or weaker or make it move or whatever by just moving the second camera on the pair.
But what would you be? Would you be controlling it live, kind of thing?
No, it's on the base.
It's all automated on the base. Okay.
Yeah, I don't touch anything live in terms of the music looks because frequently at that moment, like there's 10 other things going on, and I have to.
Yeah, you need to get other things. Yeah, you need to debug the 10 bugs that appeared during the
or just
previous hour.
Leave my room and like yell at the sound guy, or like go talk to Jake and like whether the callers are ready or whatever, get on the Slack or something. So I tried to make it so I don't have to do anything with any of these looks. This one is not working because he's wearing a mask. Jake is wearing a mask in this test footage, but I think if I feed it the host, I can I might be able to get this to work. But this is David Braun's face chop, and it is let's see if this will work. I may not even have it framed up right, but anyway, I went and I got a bunch of images of dogs, and actually you have the link to this. I don't know if you can show the actual music video the way it came out, but anyway, it's this horrific effect where I'm putting dog faces on the talent, and they're going around. Oh, I got to put it on screen. Here we go. Let's see if it'll work with Peter. I've never tried it with Peter. Nope, it's not picking up her face.
I can put it on in a second. Give me 1 second.
Okay. This ended up being like a pretty nerve-wracking moment for me because this is face tracking, which, if your talent refuses to stay on their mark, there you go, is a little difficult. And Paper really didn't want to use the Madonna mic, so they had handheld, which was breaking it. But that kind of contributed to the ability to like see Paper in between like these terrible dog faces. And the song is RR I'm Barkin', and the hook is something like bark like a dog I'm barkin'. I'm barking, I'm barking, which this look came together in like 10 minutes. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. It came together in like an hour and a half the day of the show in a panic. And I used David Braun's face chop to do face tracking because the face tracking didn't come out in TouchDesigner until like 3 weeks after this. And I saw it come out and I was like, oh man, so close. But yeah, it's terrifying. And it was really difficult because paper, as I said, is running from there. So they like use that opportunity to do a stump speech, like right when we went to that look. And like I'm on the Slack, like yelling at the DJ, like just play the song. And he's like, no, paper is supposed to tell me when to go. And I was just, I was like, my look is hanging out to dry. Like it's not supposed to be looked at for this long. It was on screen for like 4 minutes before the song came on. I was just like, this looks terrible. Just staring at it in the cold light of day. Anyway, this is the last one from the show, and it's using Bullet. I normally don't put things on the background, but I remember you asked me to do this. I'm just here we go. So it's not too crazy. It's just a bunch of instance spheres and Bullet, and this song is called Patti LaBelle. And when the talent stays on their mark, which they didn't want to, their face shows up on this sphere. So they didn't want to stay on their mark. They wanted to dance. They had this cool dance thing. So I improvised this like Latuka cloud, which thankfully they weren't going side to side too much. So it always seemed like they were standing in the cloud. And then they wanted to be able to see their body because they had these dance moves. Originally, this was going to be just their face like on a ball, like bouncing around. Mm-hmm. They didn't like that. They wanted to be able to do this dance move where it looks like they're serving patties. This is Patti LaBelle. They're in the kitchen. I don't know. It was a strange joke that they really did. But it played, and these are bouncing on the beat. And again, cam blend, like it goes through several different versions of this shot where the camera movement, is changing every 4 bars or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the paper looks, and then in the archive, I think you wanted to look at.
Yeah, like how the bathroom assembly.
Yeah.
With.
All right, and every time I do this, I have to grab a background from like one level up.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, because these are in the archives now. But in here, this is the one with Matthew Reagan and Mike Walsick's Shapes Tunnel.
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple. I mean, really, like their thing is not that simple, but the way I used it is really simple. Like their thing is a shader, and this again, I think is from GPU Gems. It's like a volumetric lighting trick where you basically like cast a ray and accumulate color from the light source, which is a point. It's a origin, which I just left in the center. And you use 3 textures. You use the light source. So this is a mask for like where light rays could come from.
Yep. You
use a background, which is where the light picks up its color from. And then you have a foreground that's going to go on top of it, which isn't entirely necessary because you can see it just comp it over.
Does this feedback frame to frame, or is this generated afresh every frame based trick of picking up color along array?
Yeah, the latter. It's just this is it right here before you comp it.
Yeah. So right.
Not that
so
much.
It's basically creating the streak every frame. There's no feedback happening here.
Right. Yeah. And you can control. It gets more expensive, but if you make more samples, it's denser within that space.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's what the density controls. I think the samples and the decay control how long it ends up being on screen.
Yeah.
And the exposure is what the fall off is within that. And then the light position, you can move the origin of that around. I think this is in GPU Gems 3, if I remember correctly.
Nice.
But
I like
this
it.
would be used with, I made Pixel Spirit Deck versions of, it used the Pixel Spirit Deck to make, here you go, like a couple of these shapes, like this one. I just actually ended up like, I think I have a thing that I'm selecting in, but you can see that my pixel shader is including all these Pixel Spirit functions that I wrote somewhere else, and I don't remember where they went. I don't know. Where's my include? Oh, there you go.
Pixel Spirit. What do you mean?
Oh, Patricio Gonzalez Vivo, who wrote the Book of Shaders, has this tarot card deck called the Pixel Spirit deck, which is this gorgeous deck of cards. Spirit deck. That I have, that each card is a drawing, and then the backside of it is the shader code for it. So, and then they build up a library of dependencies. So you'll see like later ones have an include on them.
Include earlier ones, I see.
This depends on 4, 8, and 12, and it builds up an image, and it's all like SDF, shader foo, which you would expect from him. I think it's Patricio Gonzalez Vivo and Jen Lowe, who did the book of shaders together. This
Yeah.
gorgeous. I mean, it's a really physically like beautiful thing with like gold foil on the outside and everything like that.
Oh, I see. So it's like a shader, well, calls or language that lets you build up the shapes from primitives and
Correct.
more complex assemblies of them.
Yeah, and they got this tarot vibe, which is fun. But like,
Yeah.
you learn about shading A and B. When I'm working on projects where like I need to stay in a fragment and like get a lot done, I pop this deck out and go like, you know, how do I draw a triangle? You know, like I can't remember. It's not, to me, I'm not, you know, I'm pretty good in frag shaders, but like this is an entirely other level.
Yeah, more code.
And so anyway, this is like was super helpful for me because I wanted some kind of complex shapes that I could instance. Again, that same trick. This is the output of an event chop somewhere. Here you go. Same thing, instancing these, but instancing in a shader way. You know, I'm like, I think
so you give it multiple samples, and it loops through each sample and generates a shape that accumulates in the frame buffer or whatever.
Yep. For each one, I basically scale the UVs by the magnitude of the thing in the chop, and then I draw the thing with those scaled UVs. And so I have this one, and I did, I think, another shape in the mix out of a whole bunch, you know, that I auditioned, and I decided the kind of simplest way to do that was switch between those and instancing a bunch of different other shapes like these like ring and a box and a triangle. And again, this thing was made in like a panic in like 2 hours. But the key thing is Matthew and Michael's light rays with some like nice inputs, and you get you know, this kind of really romantic disco thing. Beautiful. Which, you know, again, credit goes to Starchild. He like saw this on camera, loved it, and sold it. You know, like really.
He ran with it. Yeah, look at that. It's beautiful.
And this is Jake, but you know, if you watch the show, like he sold it. You know, he got Gorgeous. It, and did it. So you can't ask for much more than that.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. I wonder if we want to talk about. Well, I guess one thing which we talked about a while back was using the way you use probe to identify trouble spots and stuff.
Always got probe at the top level of my project, just sitting there, not cooking. And yeah, I mean, I don't know.
It can be pretty heavy.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I don't know if I use it differently than anybody else, but I certainly like, if I need a few FPS, and thankfully this show's 30 FPS, and it's running on like a serious, you know, CPU, the like late generation AMD CPU, and it's got a 3090 in the production box. This isn't it, but we really threw a lot of firepower at it, which is good because I think the VRAM is like full all the time. What I do is I go and load every scene in memory at the beginning of the show, just like so I don't have too bad a hiccup when I'm switching scenes. But like I'm pretty naively just like.
So you initialize every scene at the beginning as much as you can?
Just load everything into texture memory because that GPU has 24 gigs of texture memory. So I just put everything into texture memory, which is a cheat, but like, you know, that's the world we live in now.
No, that's fine.
And
memory.
I cook everything once, you know, because there's a lot of sims in this. So like part of my pre-show checklist is I just go like load every scene and push every button and make sure that everything's cooked once.
Good.
And then you can see, I mean, it's not too bad. This is on the CPU. The GPU is not bad either. With like 2 scenes are up already. Like I know it's not drawing, but it is drawing on this screen, and it's actually drawing the host and the guest screen as well, which have slightly different views of all the different stuff. So the total output raster, I leave the network editor open. I'm using that multi-window comp that you guys had in the palette or in the op snippets or something. And
it was in the snippets. Is under the window component.
Super sweet. And then I have my UI, so the 2 of them are each like 2500 by 1600 or something, and then 2 4K other textures, and that's all running at the same time. And it's not too bad, but of course the big hits are in my scenes. You know, currently I have the Steam Bath up, and it's not even on program. If I throw it up to program, it's going to really go nuts. And not too bad on the CPU. The GPU not bad either. But this is, you know, I could go in here, and I do right. Show, and like for example, I went in And right before the Star Child episode, I was dropping frames in a way that I was not happy with. And I noticed like, oh, music is cooking all the time. And again, still like these two are cooking, even though they're not on screen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on. It was actually in the archive. It was in the Star Child ones. And I realized that like something I don't understand about TouchDesigner was causing cooking on top chains that were not on screen because the audio analysis was forcing
pulling
it.
something. Yeah.
And sorry.
Yeah, there's mysterious reasons why things are cooking in deep in nodes, and sometimes it's because they're referring to something that's outside or something's pulling from it.
Exactly. That's what it was, yeah. And so I in a panic, like right before the show. Actually, at that point, I'll be fair to myself. I wasn't in a panic, but I was just like, I've got a clever idea. I know what to do. I'll go in and I'll put a switch on every look that says, if I'm not live, don't, the audio analysis is a dumb channel. I'll hold it or something like that.
Yeah, good.
And then the show was live, and successively in each of the looks, I was like, I thought there was more to this look. And so I dove into the network while the thing was on screen and realized that my switching logic was wrong. So one by one in each of those looks, if you watch the Star Child episode, you can see like nothing's happening. The mountain behind him's not moving. The star field's not moving, or like whatever. And then it just comes alive like halfway into the song, because every song I'd be like back to working on something else, and then I'd be looking at the music video playing and being like, dive in.
Yeah, so you are diving into networks during a show,
right?
Yeah. With which is
insane.
Risky, but you just got to do it.
I have a button on my Stream Deck here that says UI, and when I hit that, it locks the network editor, and then I save a couple of frames that way.
When you say locks it, there's a Python call, I think, to not draw it. I think, I forget.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's see what it is here. It is keyboard. It's called toggle UI redraw.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing.
Okay. Well, you wrote that, but there's something else underneath it, which is the real toggle.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I thought I was. I think I'm calling that on the window itself. Maybe no. You're right. Hang on. Let's see. So that's on the show window. Let's go up there.
It's the UI
Marcus,
class. It's in the UI class.
It's in the UI class. Okay. While we're looking,
redraw main window or something.
What's that, Marcus?
Redraw main window.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Okay. And there's two things. I wanted to ask Marcus if there's anything in the chat that you wanted to bring up, stuff people have said, and if you had to make any, do you have any suggested changes for the probe component? Because you're using it pretty hardcore. And you can tell me offline too if you think of something later, but if anything comes to mind now.
I don't know. It's pretty sweet.
Okay, think about it.
It's pretty hard to improve on it. It's heavy.
Yes, it's very heavy, but it's heavy, but it finds the stuff that's problematic. So you just have to shut it off when you're not using it.
It's really hard to improve on this. Like the visual is really, really descriptive. It's super easy to use. It's super intuitive.
Yeah. Do you middle click on it and right click on it to get the networks and the viewer?
No, I normally just have it next to the network window and I just do the same thing. That's cool though. I don't pop up network windows very often.
Or right click on it to get its parameters.
Well, the right click is popping up the thing. Let me see.
Oh, middle click then.
Middle click. Oh, yeah. Oh gosh, cool. All right, well, it's not working on that one. Funny. Huh. Well, no, I didn't know that. That's even better. But like, just the ability to look at it and dive around and like have this really, really visual. Like this is so clever. This rendering
stack.
trick.
Yeah. It took me a long time to figure out how to make it visible all the time, so you can see it ripple down and it's there. And the big ring at the bottom, you see at the bottom is the a long one from way back. I think there's some kind of some way of keeping track of things that have been happened a long time ago.
Yeah. I honestly I think this is like a brilliant piece of UX that is like critical tool for TouchDesigner, but also just on its own is like a really genius tool.
And you can listen to it if you click the bottom left button there. You can listen to the networks cook. Yeah, if you have it hooked up to your speakers, you can listen to it.
You put that in.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, basically it mixes for every node in your network. It makes an oscillator and mixes them together at the frequency of the cook time.
Yes, that makes
Which
sense.
is
I told you that's like what I went to school for. That's basically.
That's a
I read about
visualization
this
of cook time.
I read about this in this book Algorithmics, about the engineers in the old computers. They would know what the algorithm sounds like, so they had the plugs on the mainframe machines to plug in at certain sections and listen to the algorithm to tell, and basically just training themselves to be able to tell if it's correctly running. There's a couple of records out there that came with Philips technical reviews in the 60s. I'll try to find that. It's quite funny. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. Cool, and that's great. I'd like to see that. I'll put in the chat the references to Elber's thing. Well, Marcus, maybe you have some stuff from the chat.
There was one question from the chat from Nima, and it had to do with your Boulder project, Noah, and it was how many LEDs for each module approximately, and how are you controlling them? DMX ArtNet? Did you use multiple converter for LED pixel?
Right. So first answer is there's 16 nodes per triangle, if I remember correctly. And they're platonic solids, so you can work that out. I mean, there's 8 triangles in the octahedron and 20 in the icosahedron. So there's quite a few, and there's 16-bit as well, so it's a lot of channel. And that was broken out across, I believe, 3 Storm 24 NTEC units that accept ArtNet over IP and then send out DMX over Ethernet. And to each box, we sent, in the case of the icosahedrons, 2 Cat6 cables that went into a custom breakout box and a board. There's a custom board in that translates, DMX over IP to the control signal for the integrated circuits on the boards. Which those are totally custom, and we had like a power surge scare recently, and we were like, oh my gosh, we got to order more of these fabricated for this thing. And then in the case of the icosahedron, each one gets 5 Cat6 cables. So each of those cables carries, I think, 2 universes. No, it's probably more than that of data. I hope that's.
Hey, Marcus.
One thing I wanted to point out here, I'm gonna put it in the chat right now, is big shout out to Felix Loretta.
Oh,
if anybody saw him at the summit in Montreal in 2019, he's got this database. I've just put it in the chat. Noah, you used it for this project, right?
Not for that. It was inspired by that. I used it for like the first thing I ever did in TouchDesigner, which was this goofy animation that's on my website of just his procedurally generated platonic solids spinning in a light that's strobing for like a wagon wheel effect. But I would encourage everybody watching to check out Felix's polyhedra database, I think is what he called it.
Yeah, it's you used it in aspects of spun polyhedra.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah.
It's in the forum as well as a download. Yeah.
It's so cool. The polyhedra that we used, the very, very core mapping stuff at the very lowest level of like how those 3D lights came together with the texture mapping that I needed was done by Landon Thomas in the Rosetta Hall project. I had hit him up like right at the beginning of that project, and I was like, I can tell that there's going to be this one nugget in this that's a real head scratcher, which is basically like making these platonic solids and then texturing them a bunch of different ways to be able to like UV map them 10 ways till Sunday. And Landon was like, yeah, I think blah, blah, blah. And then like an hour later, he sends me this thing, and I open it, and I was like, it was kind of like Felix Loretta's thing. I was just like, oh wow, I have no idea how to use TouchDesigner. It took me like 2 hours to read it. It's not even that many nodes, but I just didn't even realize you could do that. Like the way he went about it, of basically like he took all the primitives, these are triangle faces of these objects, exploded them, put them all onto one point, transformed them so they're all stacked up, laid them out into a UV map, which I learned is called a net in mathematical terms. Like a net is one of the many ways you could unwrap a surface into a three-dimensional surface into a flat surface. But we picked a net that we agreed on as like one of the ways to unfold an icosahedron, and the one that we thought was a good fit for the octahedron. He unwraps them into a net, and this is all in like Python in point stops, basically, with like grids feeding them, but makes these nets and then texture stop and then puts them back together into 3D objects, back the way they were, having been textured. I just never seen that done before. I really don't know procedural geometry very well, and I was just like, well, thank God I asked you for help with this. Like,
props to Landon for figuring out another head scratcher.
Yeah, you got to head scratch Landon. You got to ask him nicely, though. He's a busy guy.
Awesome. Guess what, guys? I think we could keep talking till Tuesday, but we're already over time.
Yeah. Hey, Marcus, did you put in the YouTube chat?
They're all there.
The 3 links.
I did add all the links. I didn't check what I actually copied and pasted there, so
that's okay.
Yeah, I think I posted a menu for something.
Let's see what it is.
Thai restaurant. Yeah, it's all there.
But so I believe we have. Yeah. Sorry, Isabel?
I was just going to say that we had one announcement to make, and that other than having Noah on the show today, making it very, very special, it is in fact our 12th in session. So we have a dozen, and
we have a dozen. That makes that's a nice number.
Congrats!
Yeah. I wore my Summit lanyard just.
It blurs it. Yeah, you gotta.
Yeah, just for. Just in celebration
of that. Yeah, next time 13, lucky number, not a lucky number. So
well, thanks a lot for letting us see under the hood, Noah.
Yeah, Noah, it's mind-boggling, like the extent of that
a lot of art in there,
and the art is just beautiful. I mean, it's
and adaptation
and it becomes apparent how you can, with a certain base set of architecture, how you can grow this organically, because it feels like you have a few rules and you keep following them, but then you can like churn out, as you say, like you do 4 music videos in a couple hours and they plug right in. It's not too, I wouldn't say it's too rigid, like you can rewrite this next year then when you reuse it, but for exactly this on-set production, it's amazing how this all plugs together.
Yeah, that's really the thing that I think I got lucky with, and just the decisions that I made. There were definitely a couple moments along the way where I was like, uh-oh, I got to break the rules, like, you know.
It's when you add a new rule.
Yeah.
It's just
that is what ends up happening. It's like I need to know whether or not this thing is on screen, like in order to decide whether or not to do something. And then it's like, but I don't know that. And I could know that, but then they all need to know that. Like, do I do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's revealing too much to the rest of the system and stuff.
Excellent.
Well, no food poisoning today. No food poisoning.
No.
And it was brave of you to not to sort of do it right after getting shot number 2, not knowing if it was going to like take you down. So
I told you, based on the food poisoning experience, I knew I could do it. I think I did that 45-minute talk in 30 minutes because I was so hyped up on illness.
Everybody, go and watch it. We should put that let's put that in the chat. Put that later. All right, guys.
Okay.
Happy
Very
12th.
nice to see you, Noah.
Have a great weekend. Yeah.
Thank you. Happy 12th.
Yes, and we'll talk more soon, no doubt.
Thanks for everything.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. And
thanks for everyone for dropping in on this.
See you in a month.
See you later.